Welcome to the channel, and to today's episode of the Brochure Series, we're going to cover off the VS HSV range, including the entry model, the Manta, the Clubsport, the Senator, the GTS, the Maloo, the Statesman and the Grange, and also I'm going to add on the VS GTSR. This is the front cover of the brochure. We've got a VS Senator. Over the VR it has a new grille, and it also has a new 10-spoke wheel design. On this page of the brochure, HSV goes into a little bit of detail on the differences of the VS over the VR, including the grills, the new wheel design. On the top left, you have the new Senator seats with a new fabric, which are the Denvenish seats. On the bottom left, showcasing the 250 kilometre speedometer, which is new, and it's the first backlit HSV emblem. Originally, when HSV was going to put this one out, it was only going to be for the strokers, so for the 5.7 litre motors, but they decided to put it across all the range with the exception of the Manta, because it didn't have the trip computer. The bottom right, you can see through the sunroof, which was optional in the VS HSV range. This is a VS GTS based on the trim and the manual 6-speed box without climate control. Interesting thing to note is the airbag wheel there has the VR emblem, which really the VS's shouldn't have. New for the VS was the new entry model, the VS Manta, but HSV starts off in the brochure with the Clubsport, which is their mainstream model. Here you can see a brand new spoiler design, which was shared with the Clubsport and the GTS. Other new design elements for the VS Clubsport were the new grille, which was larger and protruded further towards the number plate, with a larger single slot in the middle as well. You also had the famous tri-spoke wheels, which are synonymous with the VS. For the Clubsport, they're painted silver, but on the GTS, they're polished alloy. This here is a real life example of a VS Clubsport. This one's a Series II. It's got a few personal touches, such as the polished engine covers. It also has the large tri-spokes, the aftermarket ones. They're polished like the GTS would be. The side repeater on the guard there is oval and orange because it's a Series II. You've got the Glencoe sports seats. This cloth was shared with the Clubsport and the GTS. This one's manual. As you can see, it also has the carbon fibre insert over the standard console. Clubsport was an executive-based car, but it does come with extras. For example, it's got the standard things that the executive had, central locking, power mirrors. This also has an electric antenna, trip computer, and power windows as standard. Interior-wise, you could option the front Denvenish seats. They would be based in the same cloth as the Clubsport and GTS, but the backrest does have the Clubsport embossed in it, and you could also get leather. So you could match the specification of a VS GTS, either in standard cloth or optional leather. On the VS Clubsport and GTS, the rear seat was Calais based. On the rear seat, there was no Clubsport or GTS identification. This was a more cost-effective method for HSV. They could use the same seat for both models. Moving on to the luxury model, the VS Senator. Exterior-wise, the changes were a brand new grille and a 10-spoke alloy wheel design to give that luxurious look. Inside here, this is a Series I brochure. You've got the Flinders Denvenish seats, the nice trim, a fully lined console. This one happens to be manual. It also comes with velour door trims, a 10-stack stereo system. There's an optional premium sound system with a subwoofer as well. Series I doesn't have audio controls on the steering wheel, and all Senators have climate control. They were Berliner-based vehicles and spec'd up pretty much to Calais. For the Series II VS Senator, HSV decided to shake it up by giving the seats a brand new cloth design. Under the Senator identification, there's a small leather insert, and on the top leading edge of the door trim insert, there was also a very small leather insert. In addition to this, HSV Senator VS Series II was the first HSV to receive audio controls on the steering wheel, and that was taken originally from the VR Calais. This is the Senator option with leather. The Senator identification is on the door trim, so these front seats could be used for any of the Denvenish leather seat options for GTS and Clubsport as well. The rear seat's based on the Caprice. It's highly contoured, very comfortable rear seat. I think it's still the best Holden seat we've ever had, and this is the cloth version, which is equally as comfortable. Because it was Berliner based, it also got color coded mirrors, and as per the Berliner, the handles were still black, so they weren't color coded. When the VS HSV range was released, The GTS was the top tier performance model. It followed the same formula as the Clubsport, the same Ian Callum designed body kit. The tri-spokes were polished instead of painted. The grille and the rear spoiler were the same, but the GTS did have unique decals on the rear boot, as well as the lower edges of the rear doors. On the Series 2 models, the GTS and the 215i badges became chrome instead of the silver that you see here on the Series 1. The GTS came standard with the front Denvenish seats wrapped in cloth, and on the backrest you did have GTS embossed into the fabric. The previous Denvenish seats used the old SV headrest that started for the VL Walkinshaw, but on the VS model they standardised it with a standard headrest from the Commodore, but there are some early examples of VS HSVs using the more squared SV headrests from the previous models. There was also optional leather for the GTS, the Denvenish seats. The GTS had the Calais rear seat. There was no audio controls on either Series 1 or Series 2 for the GTS. Let's take a closer look at the interior of the VS GTS. It's very similar to the VS Clubsport, especially if you option the Denvenish seats, which you can see here. This one is 6-speed manual. You do have the carbon fibre insert. Airbag is standard. Passenger's airbag was optional. The standard motor for the GTS was the Harrop Stroker. It was the 5 litre stroked out to a 5.7 litre. It had 215 kilowatts produced at 4,800 RPM. It was a torquey motor with 475 Newton meters at 3.6. If you've ever driven one of these, they are quite different to your standard 5 litre, and they produce over 80% of the torque at 1200 RPM. The standard manual transmission was the T566 speed, as the standard 5-speed manual for the 5 litre would not handle the torque. You also had the optional automatic. Part of the 215i package for the GTS, and when optioned on the Senator, was the low restriction stainless steel exhaust with twin catalytic converters, the sport suspension for the GTS, HSV premium brakes, the same that we used on the Group A. You also had a Hydrotrack speed sensitive limited slip diff. A total of 375 VS GTSs were produced, 221 in Series 1, 154 in Series 2, 241 of those were manual and 134 were automatic. The new car price for the VS GTS was $65,975. Let's move over to the 2-door HSV, which is the VS Maloo. It had the same styling package as the VR with the new VS Clubsport grille. It had a new 5-spoke wheel design that was shared with the Manta. Interior wise, it used the Clubsport fabric with Maloo identification on the backrest. You had the standard console. It was available in manual as standard with the 185 kilowatt package, produced at 4,800 RPM and 400 Newton meters at 3.6. As with the Clubsport, the Maloo came standard with a 9-function trip computer and a leather-wrapped airbag wheel. There was optional power windows for the VS Maloo initially. The one you see here is a Series 1. There was also a Series 2 and Series 3 Maloo released. When the VT was released, there was no VT Ute. So HSV updated the VS. They added the 5-spoke wheels, which look similar to the VT Clubsport, but they ran in 7-inch instead of 8-inch. You also had the optional dynamic rear wing. The rear 185i badge was updated to the VT graphics. Late in the run, the 195i roller motor did make it into the VS Maloo, but that was in 1999 and early 2000. Inside, it was very similar to the previous Maloo. The fabric was updated and it did have Maloo written on the fabric. Here we've got a real life example of a very late VS Maloo. It's a 2000 model Series 3. Exterior wise, there was very little changes. One thing they did adopt though is the side repeater is clear, taken from the VT Series 2. Interior wise, you've got a new seat trim as well, which you can see here. This video was taken at All Holden Day. If you haven't seen that video, check it out. Mechanically, the upgrades were to the motor. With the roller motor, the 5 litre was now a 195. It produced that at 4,800 RPM. It also had 30 Newton meters extra torque with 430 at 3.6. So this was the most powerful ute that Holden had ever produced at that point of time. Even though the LS1 was in the VT, that was not in the ute until the VU was released. Moving on to the new entry model for the VS, which was the VS Manta. It had the familiar package of the 185 kilowatt motor, produced at 4,800 RPM and 400 newton meters of torque at 3.6. Styling wise, the VS Manta was quite subtle compared to the Clubsport. It had the standard Holden bars with all the SS body additions. It also had a new grille. It did bear HSV badges. There was no fog lights like the SS, and it also shared the same wheels as the Maloo. For the VS, the Manta wagon replaced the VR Clubsport wagon, so you did lose the standard Clubsport front bar designed by Ian Cullen. Had the same 5-spoke wheels. Inside you had the Nardi steering wheel as standard. There was no airbag unless you wanted that. The Nardi steering wheel was actually originally used on the VP Senator, standard on the VR Clubsport, and also used on the VR GTS with a different centre. So the VS Manta is actually the last HSV model to have a non-airbag wheel as standard. These are the seats in the VS Manta, exactly the same design at the front as the Clubsport, but it's got a different fabric. I actually prefer this fabric over the Clubsport fabric. The rear seat, however, on the Manta is executive based with the sunken headrests, which was the formula that they used for VR and VP Clubsports as well. The Manta didn't have power windows, they were an option, as was the trip computer. You could also get dual airbags. You could also get the Denvinish seats in cloth, which I've seen an example, which is extremely rare, or leather. So there's a lot of options, but to do that you may as well have probably bought a Clubsport. When the VS was released, there was a HSV Statesman option in either the 185i or 215i kilowatt package. The wheels are based on SV5000 wheels in 16 inch. They were modified and there was a very large center cap, as you can see there, and they're polished. I'm not going to go into too much detail on the HSV Statesman because it's basically the base car for its replacement in Series 2 when the VS Grange was released. As you can see here, there's some styling updates. There was 10-spoke 17B8 wheels taken from the Senator. Being a Series 2, it's got an oval repeater. There's also a Grange badge on the rear and on the back doors. And they also came with the limited edition 1984 Penfolds Grange Hermitage wine. The back of the brochure also has all the specifications for the 185 kilowatt motor and the optional 215i stroker. Let's take a look at a real life example here. It appears to be a Series 3, unless the blinker's been changed on the guard there. You've got a very small 215i badge under the Grange badge, a unique HSV bubble badge on the garnish, and a very small lip spoiler. Interior wise, very similar to a Caprice, but the cloth inserts that were on part of the leather seats for Caprice have been replaced with full leather. This one here has the later console design of the Series 3, and it's got the standard radio, climate control, leather bound gear shift lever and handbrake lever. And this is the rear seat, which was basically used for the Senators as well, highly contoured. Let's move over to the last car, the VS GTSR. Only 85 were built, 9 were sent to New Zealand. It was released with the flagship GTS motor, the 5.7 litre V8 with the T5 6-speed transmission, and Hydrotrack limited slip diff was also standard. The Blueprint HRT motor was also an option, which was $10,500. Every GTSR came out in one colour. It was XU3 yellow. It was used on the Victorian taxi cabs. When purchased new back in 1996, every owner received this jacket and also a special GTSR cap. As part of the owner package when buying new, each purchaser was flown to Melbourne. They could tour the HSV factory and they were treated as a VIP guest. They were able to see all of the cars being built. A photo with the owner and their unfinished car was also taken. As with the Clubsports and GTSs, the VS GTSR started as an executive base car. Holden supplied it with 15-inch wheels and non-colour coded bumper bars and some bare essentials. As you can see here, they're being converted to the GTSR spec with the bumpers, interior and the wheels. The GTSR used the HSV body styling kit by Ian Callum from the VR Commodore, and it even included the VR Senator grille. This is the VS GTS. The tri-spoke wheels were carried over to the GTSR from the VS Clubsport and GTS. Very new. This is the GTSR at the motor show. The other day when I went to a show, there was 2 VS GTSRs. This is one of them, and I believe this one's up for sale now for over $300,000. Let's have a look at the back. The badging on the GTSR was unique. There was yellow highlights and it was also blacked out. The 215i decal was also yellow. Same with the side skirt badges. This is the first short wheelbase model to have colour-coded door handles for a HSV. The grille on the VS GTSR actually belongs to the VR Senator and was not on any other VS models. The HSV premium brakes, the twin piston brakes, were standard on the VS GTSR. They were used on models like the VN Grip A, SV5000, VP GTS, VR and VS GTS. Ian Callum, who designed the VR HSV body kit, did do some design elements to the VS GTSR, including the stitching on the console, gear knob and the steering wheel. That was really a first for HSV, having different colour stitching highlights on some of the interior items. The black vinyl wrap centre console was an updated version of the VS Caprice console, which also used black at the time. All GTSRs were 6-speed manual. They also used the carbon fibre insert on the console from the VS GTS. As with all HSV models of the time, each one had an individual dash plaque with the build number. On the inside, it followed a very similar formula to the VR and VS GTS. The rear seat was Calais based. The Denvenish seats, which were also standard. The steering wheel was leather wrapped, as was the gear shift. All VS GTSRs were in 23i interior colour, which was the blue. The centre console, as mentioned earlier, had the yellow stitching and carbon fibre inserts. Radically bright yellow GTSR fabrics and stitching makes the car stand out from the other models significantly. HSV gave the VS GTSR the half-cloth door trims taken from the Acclaim, Berliner and the VSSS. The heart of the car is the Iron Lion. It's the 5 litre that's stroked to a 5.7 litre 215 kilowatt motor with 475 newton meters. This motor is carried over from the VR and VS GTS. There was an option for the motor to be blueprinted. In the VS range, it was a $10,500 option. Most people think that the blueprint option came out for the VS GTSR. It actually came out on the VR, and you can see that with this invoice.
Yeah, I've done all right, I guess. The business has put the kids through school and looked after Mum. Jane and I managed to get away every now and then. I even had a few bob left over last year. I thought about topping up my super. Then I decided, stuff that. Life's too short.
The VS GTSR is nicknamed the Banana. It's a car that's easily recognisable and it sure stands out from a crowd. This is the HSV build plate on the firewall. The front end looks really tough. It's got the special HSV yellow badge, VR Senator grille, HSV body kit with the carbon fibre inserts. The race inspired rear wing was radical at the time. It really stands out. It has carbon fibre inserts. It's quite large and striking in appearance. and if you're on the freeway you can actually hear the downforce of the wind on it. It's quite loud. The boot mounted stop light is actually taken from the Holden Calibra. The VS GTSR was virtually identical mechanically to the VR and VS GTS, however it did have a different exhaust design. There was more free-flowing exhaust system as part of this package, and it shared the straight-through intermediate muffler taken from the 185 of the Clubsport, but the rear muffler was a new specific design, and when compared to the other 215i systems, the engine back pressure is reduced slightly in the GTSR. Got a little brochure here on the VS authentic merchandise. There's quite a big range. I can imagine that this would be worth top dollar today. It still exists and is in good condition.
HSV is proud to announce an exclusive customer opportunity. Purchase any one of our superb vehicles before February 10 and we'll send you and a partner to England on a VIP visit to TWR's Technical Centre and Formula One Racing headquarters, including 5 nights accommodation in London, flying Qantas. So start the new race season in style by contacting your participating HSV retailer today.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoy the brochure series, please check out the playlist. There's heaps of others, heaps of other car videos as well, and also the Back in Time photo series. Catch you on the next video.